Well, it's that time of the month again where I pick 5 movies from my physical media collection that I picked up from random pawn shops or thrift stores and decide if I'm going to keep them, sell them, trade them in, or donate them to a library. With the bonus pick at the end of a movie I don't currently own, but still feel I need to watch. These could be recommendations from friends, family, the community, new releases, older films I missed out on, and or anything in between. This month we got a lot of stuff from the 2000s, which is an overhated era in horror in my opinion, just because it was a very noticeable transitional phase in horror from what was coming out of the 90s to what became more popular in the 2010s. But with that aside, it was a bit of a golden age when it came to straight to video releases because places like Blockbuster were still popular and a lot of people tend to glance over that, especially when it comes to the B-rated stuff. So with all that said, let's talk movies. Starting with Shuttle. So the version of this I picked up at a thrift store turned out to actually be a bootleg, which is why I say you should never just buy movies so they can look cool on yourself and always watch everything you own at least once. There was no menu, no trailers, just a sticker for a label, and it went straight into the movie after it loaded. But even with all that, I still decided to give it a chance, and after doing so, I have no idea why anyone would even bother bootlegging something like this. It's a 2009 thriller about 2 girls on a trip to Mexico that end up taking a shuttle in the rain that turns out to be driven by a predator. It kind of reminded me of a low-budget Midnight Meat Train, but without any of the things that made that movie interesting. The acting was bad in quite a few scenes, and the script didn't help it out at all. It felt way more like a thriller than an actual horror movie. There's some essay scenes in it and themes of human trafficking, and not in a shocking for shock value kind of way. I just didn't care much for this. It's mostly just 2 girls being told what to do for the whole movie while trying to survive this guy. And I know I shouldn't spoil the ending of this, but I kind of feel like I need to here because it makes you feel like the girls have a chance to maybe make it out of all of this, but no, they don't. One of the girls dies because she has a yeast infection, and the other one gets shipped off to Asia in a shipping crate, making this movie really, really, really not anything great. So yeah, this one is getting deleted. I'm probably going to take this bootleg copy back to the thrift store where I got it and let them know that they accidentally sold me something that could potentially have been illegal, and then let them decide what happens next to it. Taking Lives is an unrated crime thriller from 2004 starring Angelina Jolie and Ethan Hawke, and the version I picked up was the extended cut that runs for about an hour and 45 minutes, which is kind of comical now with how many 2.5 hour long movies we keep getting lately. Man, I love a good 90-minute movie. This one was a rewatch for me, but it had been so long since I had seen it that I'd completely forgotten everything about it. Like I may have watched it once when it was new and that was it. It's about an FBI agent who specializes in forensics trying to track down a serial killer with the help of an art dealer, and it felt like an early 2000s version of Silence of the Lambs, just without all the transphobic stuff that movie gets criticized for now. There's a little bit of gore in it, but not much, and it felt more like a mystery crime thriller than a horror movie, giving me Nancy Drew vibes with how the investigation plays out. I found it kind of slow in spots. It does have themes of domestic violence and stalking in it if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to lie here, but I feel like this whole movie was building up to one big scene where you get to see Angelina Jolie in the nude. And while I'm sure that sold tickets back in 2004, that alone isn't really enough for me to keep something in my collection. That said, the twist near the end saved this movie for me, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to spoil it. If you like crime thrillers, you can usually find this one floating around at pawn shops for like $1, and at that price, it's not a bad pickup. I just don't know if this fits in my collection long term because I don't really have a crime thriller section. So for now, this one's going into the library pile, but I'm going to keep it a little longer before I decide where it goes. Ghost Rig is a 2003 British supernatural horror movie about a group of environmental activists going onto an oil rig to spread their message, only to arrive and find the whole place abandoned. This movie gets into the story pretty quickly. The problem is it takes too long to get into the horror stuff, and not in a good slow burn kind of way. When the horror does kick in, it feels more like a slasher than a supernatural horror movie, with people getting possessed and then running around killing each other. The first act is probably the best part of this movie because after about halfway through when things get revealed about what's going on, it takes a tonal shift that just declines from there. It felt like a low-budget made-for-TV movie because it was. It also felt like a British ripoff of Alien or The Thing, but with slasher elements to it, even though it's supposed to be a supernatural horror movie. When I picked this up, I bought it expecting it to be bad, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. Though how do you make a horror movie set on an oil rig and not have one single explosion? Would I recommend it? No. Would I throw it on while I have people over? No. It's not scary. The ending is really mediocre, and once again, the villain wins after the big reveal of who the villain is. It's not the worst made-for-TV horror movie I've ever seen, but that's not really saying much here. It's getting deleted. I'll probably just trade this one in for something else. Dark Skies is a 2013 Blumhouse production suburban family horror movie from back when Blumhouse had a better reputation than it does today. It was produced by the same people behind Insidious and Sinister, but I feel that comparison might make you go into this expecting more than you get out of it. It's about a family whose peaceful suburban life starts falling apart after they become targeted by what might be some sort of alien threat, and how the stress of all that starts creating tension within the family itself. Kind of reminded me of a mix between Poltergeist, The Sixth Sense, and Paranormal Activity, but with aliens. Which I know sounds like it shouldn't work, but it does in its own unique kind of way. It has its scary and creepy moments, but there's little to no gore in it at all. It's definitely something that's much more of a spooky family horror movie than anything brutal or intense. The whole movie feels like it could have been written by Stephen King and directed by Steven Spielberg. Even though it wasn't, it just has that vibe about it. This one is definitely staying in my collection for now because at its core, it's a solid example of a family horror movie that focuses on the horrors of being a family and trying to maintain it through an unknown crisis. It would make for a really good double feature with Poltergeist, which I already own both versions of. Though if I had to pick between this or the Poltergeist movies, I'd probably go with either version of Poltergeist. And lastly, my personal favorite out of the 5 this month, Wolf Creek, is an unrated Australian horror movie based on a true story that plays out like a mix between the Blair Witch Project, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Wrong Turn. To be honest, I haven't actually been enjoying a lot of the horror movies that have been coming out of Australia lately. I know there's definitely been some hits, but for me personally, there's been more misses, and some of those misses were so bad that I almost get nervous now when I hear a new horror movie is coming out from Australia. But this one worked well for me. It's about a group of friends traveling through the Australian outback when their vehicle breaks down in the middle of nowhere and a random guy shows up to help them out, only for things to turn dark once they realize he has some very sinister intentions, which leads to them being hunted. It is exploitative in a way similar to the Hostel movies, and I feel like it was done that way intentionally because of how the Australian accent can sometimes come across less threatening when trying to sound like an evil character on screen. Not saying Australians can't be scary or evil, because obviously this is based on a true story, just basing that on how things appear on screen sometimes. That said, the villain in this does an amazing job here by portraying a villain with a smile on his face as he goes about doing evil things, and somehow that makes him even creepier. The movie has a gritty look to it, with some shots feeling like they were taken on a home camcorder, but not in a found footage kind of way, just there to make everything feel more realistic. It is very dark in some scenes when it comes to the lighting, and it does have some SA scenes in it if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff. But this movie is often cited as one of the best modern Australian horror movies of all time, and I can see why. So I think this is worth keeping around in my collection for that reason, just in case anyone is looking for an example of a good horror movie from Australia. It's definitely one of those movies that sticks with you after the credits roll. And for my bonus pick this month, I needed to watch They Will Kill You, which is about a girl who learns to fight in prison and then breaks into a satanic cult's headquarters to try and save her little sister. And the best way to describe this movie is if Kill Bill was directed by Sam Raimi, because that description is weirdly accurate. It's got all the goofy, over-the-top weirdness of Evil Dead mixed with the stylized action of Kill Bill. There's tons of over-the-top gore, but it's the fun kind of gore where people explode in absurd ways and you can obviously tell that everything is fake. The script isn't perfect, and the slapstick comedy probably won't work for everyone, but I loved this so much, making it the first movie of the year to make my must-buy list, and is easily my favorite B-movie of the year so far. Even though it had a $2 million budget, which is high for an indie film, but still low for Hollywood. It's just a stylized B-movie, kind of like Sucker Punch was, which is a B-movie to me, and I love it for being that. Also, the movie plays out like a video game, with each section getting bigger and more intense as the story goes along, giving me Kung Fury vibes in the best way. The soundtrack is awesome, with lots of hip-hop and bass music during the chaotic action scenes, and the inclusion of one of my favorite newer bands going right now, the Nova Twins, really sealed the deal for me on this one. It did flop at the box office, but only because the premise was very similar to Ready or Not 2, which more people were familiar with and came out around the same time. Though I like this much more than Ready or Not 2. Like, if any of these two movies gets a sequel, I'd much rather see this get one than a Ready or Not 3. But that's going to be it from me. I'm glad you all are liking this series because I'm having fun making it. Just as a reminder before you go that we do have our own Discord server now that is free to join in the pinned comments below. And if you're into B-movies, cult classics, hidden gems, and horror, or just in the mood for something different than what the mainstream media has to offer you, like and subscribe. And I will see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching.